The anti-austerity rally in Spain ends in unrest. Protesters say they can't afford budget cuts and tax hikes. We ask, is austerity the answer to Spain's economic crisis? And will the Spanish people accept it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Divya Gopalan. It is good to have you here with us. So, rubber bullets were fired at protesters in Madrid as they vented their anger at $80 billion worth of government cutbacks and tax rises. The protest coincided with the Eurozone minister's decision to bail out Spanish banks to the tune of $123 billion. Now, this would come in return for strict reform on their financial system. Paul Brennan has more.
Pensioners, police, teachers, government staff, firefighters, bus drivers, union members and those with no union affiliation at all. Tens of thousands of people for whom protest has become a necessity rather than a mere expression of dissent.
Less than a month ago, the anti-austerity protest movement appeared exhausted and demoralised. But in the last week, it seems re-energised, revitalised. And just look at the response, perhaps the biggest protest yet in the streets of Madrid.
Pilar Gil is not a natural demonstrator. Now 58, she was looking forward to retiring after nearly 30 years in the public sector. But the cuts have hit her hard.
Why am I so upset? I'm upset because the cutbacks aren't taking us anywhere. In my wages, we're talking about a loss of €200 every month. And because I'm not a highly paid executive, I really feel it.
It is the public sector workers who are being hit hardest by Spain's austerity programme. Job losses, pay cuts and cancelled bonuses have produced bitter resentment. Earlier on Thursday, in a show of coordinated resistance, government workers logged off their computers at 12 noon and walked out. Even management threats don't deter them anymore.
Yesterday told us he's going not to pay us our salary next month if we continue protest.
And what do you say to them?
Continue.
Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has been unmoved by the public protest as he pursues a programme to cut the public deficit by $80 billion in 2 years. Spain's economy is in serious trouble. Nearly 1 in 4 Spaniards are unemployed. 8.95% of Spanish bank loans are now looking doubtful for repayment. And the cost of servicing Spain's public debt is rising. Bond yields up again on Thursday. But such abstract concepts hold little water with the people on the streets. They are struggling with reduced wages, higher taxes and seriously diminished prospects. People here are starting to talk about Spain becoming ungovernable. Paul Brennan for Inside Story, Madrid.
So, is austerity the answer to Spain's economic woes? To discuss this, we're joined by our guests. In Barcelona, Susana Belmonte, an economist and the author of Nada está perdido, meaning nothing is lost. In Cambridge, Antonio Cabrales, a professor of economics at Universidad Carlos III de Madrid and a contributor to the Spanish Nada es gratis blog, meaning nothing is free. And in Madrid, Gallego-Garcia. He's the international coordinator of the Public Services Federation, which is under the UGT trade union. Welcome to all my guests. I want to start with Antonio Cabrales and put this question to you. Is austerity the way to move Spain's economy forward?
Well, austerity is simply the only option, given that Spain doesn't have enough resources right now to fund the liabilities of the public sector and the bailout of the banks. As such, we don't have anything to do with it. Is it the way to further growth? No, I don't think so. Austerity is only going to retard economic growth. Reform measures are needed, but it's not the best thing to do to launch them at the same time that you have an austerity program.
Right, and I'm going to put that same question to Gallego-Garcia as people are pounding the streets right now, protesting against these austerity measures. Why isn't austerity the way to go? I mean, Spain needs help from the outside world, and in order to do that, they need to show that they're responsible.
Well, Spain has been a very responsible country, and is still a very responsible country. We are starting to be responsible, actually, in the way we are implementing austerity measures, that the only things that are given and the only thing we are getting into is into a poorer country. And actually, the only thing that has been proven is that these austerity measures has no effect whatsoever in the credibility of the country, since the biggest cuts ever made in the history of our country were made last week, and today our country risk reached at 6 points over. So it's very simple. The answer is not the measure. The measures are not working. Actually, they are working against us.
Okay, fine. So we all agree that there is an underlying issue to the detriment to the economy. But Susana Martin Belmonte, don't you agree that Spain needed to bail out the banks? They needed this bailout, or a large number of banks would fail, affecting your average person. So isn't there a cost for this austerity?
Of course there is a cost. This is actually a way to make the poor pay for the debts of the banks. And if you are talking about alternatives to this situation, you have to think about other ways of running the economic system. We have been facing the financial crisis as an emergency situation for 4 years already, and I think it's time to realize what's going on. And what's going on is that poor people are paying for the debts of the banks.
All right. Antonio Cabrales, if the Spanish banks did not receive this bailout, what would happen?
Well, if they don't receive the bailout, most likely they will go bankrupt. If those that are in trouble go bankrupt, there's many institutions that are going to lose money. Probably also the bigger banks, the ones that seem right now in good shape, are going to start losing money. At this point, it's very hard to know what would be the final consequences of this, and as a result, I think it's prudent to bail out some of these banks, to separate some of these debts, but it could have been done in a more organized way if it would have been done earlier, if the bondholders would have been allowed to have some losses. Neither of this was done. It was postponed for too long, and that's one of the reasons for the mess we're in at this point.
And Antonio Cabrales, do you take Susana Martin Belmonte's point that it is mainly the poor that are paying for these austerity measures?
Most people are paying for these measures. It's the poor, but it's also the civil servants. The income tax is being raised, so basically all wage earners are paying for this. I think it would have been much easier if the European Central Bank would have been a bit less uptight and would have guaranteed the debt. You just have to think that when the debt premium is at 6 points and the Spanish debt being over 70%, you're eating up just in interest all that you have gained by the cuts. So that's the answer. If we were able to contain the debt premium, it would be much easier to do this adjustment, this fiscal adjustment that is certainly needed in an easier way.
Okay, so I want to take it down to the people in the streets. Jesus Gallego-Garcia, there are protesters on the streets right now. Many people are going to lose their jobs and take pay cuts. That's the immediate effect. Can you give us a picture of what happens when we go forward with these austerity measures further down the line?
Well, since the only thing that has been proven, and it's not only in the short-term history, but in the history, I would say, of Europe and of the world, is that the austerity measures do not work to get us out of that, but on the very opposite, it gets us into a worse situation. The people is getting more and more burnt out by this situation. Yesterday, just behind the picture you're seeing here is the center of Madrid, the Plaza de Cibeles. Just in Madrid, 800,000 people were demonstrating against these austerity measures. Antonio said before, poor people It's not only poor people that is paying for this, also civil servants. I would say civil servants are poor people in Spain. Many of them are having a salary of less than 1,000 euros, and they are risking to lose their jobs. The government itself announced that after making the worst labor reform ever made in Spain, the most damaging reform ever made in Spain, they have announced that probably we will reach the 6 million and the 6 million unemployed people in Spain. This means that the streets are going to literally burn. This is nothing probably that we would like, no one of us, but you cannot take this out of people. People is literally burning out. They are seeing that they have no social benefits, that they are retiring their pensions, that they are cutting their benefits in unemployment. Hospitals are they're closing hospitals. Education, public education, it's about to close. And at the same time, we are bailing out some banks, by the way, not all the banks, some banks that were extremely irresponsible in their behavior, but very responsible of what is going on. And people is not going to accept this. And trade unions and all the organizations that we are fighting against this are certainly not going to accept it.
Okay, so it's clear that people in Spain are going to suffer and they are feeling the pain. But Susana Martin Belmonte, you know, people in Germany are paying higher taxes and in other areas of the Eurozone in order to prop these Spanish banks. So isn't it fair that the people in Spain should be tightening their belts too?
It has nothing to do. I mean, it's the German banks who lend the money to the Spanish banks on the idea that they could get some profits out of it. Now they have made, it's proven that they have made a wrong decision. Now they should face the consequences. This is free market. And if German taxpayers are facing whatever issue they are facing in their country, if they are also bailing out their banks, it's not the Spanish people's problem. And none of the problems of the banks should be put into the backs of the people of any country.
Spain has tried to put out some bonds, has tried to feed their debt. Now interest rates are rising, those yields are rising, which means that a lot of countries do not have confidence in Spain. Spain's economy has contracted. There's going to be a point where Spain will need more of a bailout from the EU and IMF. And the fact is that putting these austerity measures in place right now will give other countries confidence to give them that money. Antonio Cabrales, is this a fair point to make? Is this a reason to have these austerity measures?
That's the only reason to make these austerity measures. Since the Spanish people don't save enough to be able to fund all these liabilities and beggars can be choosers, then we need to do the things that the international organizations ask us to do. But as I said before, I think there are other ways. There are simpler ways. There's ways that have been proven to work. For example, in the United States, it's a little bit mysterious to me why the European Central Bank doesn't want to do quantitative easing that has worked so well in both the UK and the US. But that's the way they're going. If they don't want to do that, of course, the only way forward is with the austerity measures. But I insist that I don't think it's the best way to go.
All right, so you all agree that this is not the best way to go. But Jesus Gallego-Garcia, the fact is these austerity measures are going to go into place. What do you think is going to happen next? Are we going to see more protests in the streets?
First of all, I would like to say something to what was said before. Nobody is giving money to Spain. It should be very clear that they are borrowing the money, and by the way, on a very high rate. I mean, nothing is being given for free. Spain is a responsible country, has been a responsible country, and has been paying the debts out. So what I really think is that there is an ideological meaning in all this. Of course, austerity is not, I don't believe that we need to put into place these austerity measures in order to show confidence to the markets, because actually are the markets the one demanding these austerity measures just to get more money out of us. People is not going to accept this. The thing is that everybody understands it. It's a very simple game where they are holding the pan and we are in the pan. It's an ideological question. People is not going to stop. And actually, the farther we go with these measurements, the worse it will be. It's a dead circle. We will never get out of this with this. You will never get the confidence of the people, the trust of the people. I'm sure people will be willing to make efforts if they will see that there is efforts for building economy, creating more jobs, giving better public services to the citizenship, and very important, the only way one can get out of a crisis is with consensus. Our constitution was a very good example. Trade unions, which are under the constitution, we show that we can build a consensus in order to get into a better place. But this government, and it's not only the government, but the Europe of today and the markets of today have decided to get rid of the consensus of the people, and they want to do it only by themselves. They will never, never succeed with that. And the worst thing that can happen is actually what they are leading us into getting more and more people into the streets, into getting an image of the country that is not probably the one nobody want to show, but it's the reality. But this is only have been created by them. So
Susana, I want to put this to you. The fact remains that these measures are going to go in place. People will have to take cuts. What do you think is going to happen next? How do you think the Spanish population is going to deal with this?
It's very hard to say. Spanish people are going to protest, but hopefully they will also engage into the search of new ways of running the economy. We are in a monetary and financial system that has proven that whenever there is a gain to make in the financial market, there is a bank or a financial institution to get it. Whenever there is a loss, there is a taxpayer to pay for it. That's not the market, that's not the rules they sold us. And so in our social contract, there has to be a development in which we decide what kind of monetary and financial system we want. And thankfully, there are people running alternative monetary and financial systems, and as a a test of what we need in terms of monetary and financial system. So I hope that the protests are not exactly or just the measure that the Spanish people are going to take in this situation.
Okay, staying with this theme of protest, Jesus, your union is one of the groups that advocates these protests and say that people should be putting their voices out there. Now, the problem here is it seems like not only public workers, public sector workers, there's also police and other security people on the streets now. There's a fear that Spain will become ungovernable. It's a thought that our correspondent had said in his report just before we came to you. How concerned are you about this?
We are very concerned, but if we are concerned about the ungovernability of the country, it's because probably the government is not governing. They are doing what they are doing due to their ideology. They are doing what they are told to do, regardless of the people that voted them. It's very important and actually very interesting to say that the UGT, my trade union organization, together with the big trade union organizations and more than 300 associations from all kinds, pensionists, doctors, actors, miners, regardless of the protest that we are arranging, people actually is coming down to the streets. They are coming by their own will in order to follow us sometimes or just to march by themselves because they cannot stand it. If you want governability, let's go to the social contract, let's sit together, let's talk about it, let's see how can we get out of this. Unfortunately, the government has no interest whatsoever in listening to the trade union organizations, the associations, or the people. From Europe, the messages they are receiving, and we see it in the case of Italy, for example, where President Monti says that the origin of the crisis in Italy it's the consultation, with the trade unions. We see that it's the recipe that Europe want to give. But if they don't want this to explode, eventually they will have to sit down. We have to come out of this all together. It's not one of the sides that can do it by themselves. And the demonstration, it's here in the street of Madrid and in all Spain and in all Europe.
Antonio Cabrales, Jesus Gallego-Garcia had underlined the importance of these protests and the fact that your average person is coming out on the streets despite not being called to come on the streets. So there's clearly discontent over this. But does the government have any room to do anything now? Isn't it too late?
They could do things. I think one of the reasons why people are so upset is the general feeling that the pain is not shared equally among everyone. I think something that would start helping is if they made strong decisions to, for example, let the bondholders of the bank take a big part of the pain, not just the citizenship, and not just pay everything. So allow some of these banks to go bankrupt, provided they're not systemic. They could, for example, they've already raised the income tax, which is one good thing, but they could also try to avoid some of the loopholes that exist in the tax system. So the really wealthy people can form societies that then pay taxes at very low rates. That should be basically stopped. So any measures that they take that guarantee that it is not only the general taxpayer or the general wage earner that is going to suffer the cuts, but everybody else is doing some part of the adjustment, then that would help a lot to build the kind of consensus that that Jesus, for example, was asking for.
Susana, Belmonte. Now, Prime Minister Rajoy said his current plan would cut 65 billion euros over the next 2.5 years. You know, in the lifespan of things, 2.5 years is not that long. But what do you think, what kind of damage it could do within that time?
I think there should be some kind of jubilation or something like that to get the market alive again, or because this kind of payment is going to withdraw resources from the population in a way that is going to make the market collapse. I mean, this is a natural tendency in capitalism. The wealth tends to concentrate in very few hands, and the lack of demand is makes the market collapse, and is a vicious circle. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea. I mean, I don't see any way out unless there is a jubilation or a war, right, which is unfortunately one of the ways out of this situation.
Okay, so now Jesus Garcia, as a final, I'm giving you the final word, and I'm taking you as the representative of those people on the streets. I mean, if there's one message they should be sending to the government, what would it be?
I think that the message that the government, but not only the Spanish government, but the European government and the European institutions should be that if we need austerity, you cannot put austerity into place when we are thinner. We need longer time and we need growth. It's impossible to put into terms these austerity measures when we are at our weakest point. Let's grow, let's make austerity with growth, and in the moment that we are strong again, in the moment that our body is healthy and we are education is back where it used to be, the society is steady again, let's put some of these austerity measures into place if needed, because I repeat again, I believe that all of us believe these fallacies that the markets are ruling and this is just part of the system and there is no other way out. And actually, there is another way out. There are other way out, like Antonio have spoken, fair taxation, growth. Let's go for it. Let's create more jobs. Let's give people the trust. Let's do, all of us, something about it together. Let's not detach governments for the people, because we have in Europe and actually all over the world very good examples of what happened when only one part is deciding to rule the game, regardless of the people they are supposedly governing.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for the discussion. I'd like to thank all of our guests in Barcelona, Susana Martin Belmonte, in Cambridge, Antonio Cabrales, and in Madrid, Jesus Gallego-Garcia. And thank you to our viewers for spending your time with us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, you can just email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.